Imagine the longest, darkest winter in human history. Temperatures plummet 30 degrees below zero for decades. The sun becomes a pale disk behind endless blizzards. Herds vanish. Plants die. Rivers freeze, solid dot in hidden caves lit only by dying embers. Our ancestors faced a choice no one wants to speak aloud: starvation or the unthinkable. Tonight, we will follow the frozen evidence that has been buried for 30,000 years: cut-marked human bones, cracked skulls boiled for marrow, entire families reduced to the last resource. What you are about to hear is the darkest survival secret of the Ice Age, and it is written in our own skeletons. Close your eyes. The fire is almost out, and the hunger has just begun. Imagine a world locked in white silence. 20-5,000 years ago, the last glacial maximum gripped the planet like a fist of ice in the northern hemisphere. Mile-thick ice sheets pressed down on what are now Scotland, Germany, and half of North America. The oceans had surrendered so much water to those glaciers that sea level fell more than 400 feet. Britain was not an island. It was a frozen peninsula joined to Europe by a windswept tundra plain called Doggerland. Southern France, Italy, Spain, places we think of as warm, were Arctic steppe, where the wind never stopped screaming. The sun rose pale and low, a dull coin behind perpetual cloud. Daylight lasted only a few hours, and even then the light felt thin, as though the sky itself were exhausted. Temperatures in winter regularly dropped to -30, -40 degrees Celsius. Summer was a brief, cruel tease. 2 months when the top few inches of soil thawed into black mud before the frost returned. Was not one bad winter. This was a regime that lasted 6,000 years. 6,000 years of darkness and hunger. Now, picture the people living inside that darkness. They numbered fewer than 10,000 breeding adults on the entire European continent, perhaps fewer than 30,000 across the whole globe. A single modern city subway station at rush hour holds more human beings than existed in the whole of Ice Age. France. They were scattered in tiny bands, sometimes only 20 or 30 souls. Separated by hundreds of kilometers of empty white, contact between groups was rare. When two bands did meet after years of isolation, they might stare at one another across a frozen river, like strangers from different worlds, because in many ways they were. Their prey had begun to disappear. The great herds that once thundered across the grasslands: mammoth, woolly rhino, steppe bison, giant deer with antlers 3 meters wide, were thinning. Some species were already gone from whole regions. Reindeer still migrated, but the routes shifted unpredictably with the moving edge of the ice. A band could follow the herds for weeks, only to find the animals had vanished into blizzards, leaving nothing but old tracks filled with blowing snow. Plants were worse. In the heart of the glacial maximum, the land between the ice sheets and the southern mountains was cold desert. Willows and dwarf birch clung to life in sheltered valleys, but they offered almost nothing a human could eat. Roots were frozen solid, a handspan beneath the surface. Berries, seeds, wild grains, things that had fed earlier generations, were memories. Even the lichen grew too slowly to be worth scraping. firewood became the most precious substance on earth. Bones were burned when wood ran out, dried mammoth dung when bones ran out, and when the last dung was gone, people huddled together under skins, breathing one another's warmth, listening to the wind try to find a way into the cave. Hunger has stages, and these people knew them all. First comes the tightening belt, the careful rationing, the decision to give the last scraps to the children and the pregnant. Then the body begins to eat itself, fat first, then muscle. The mind sharpens for a while and cruel gift before it starts to slide into dreamlike detachment. Hallucinations visit the starving, voices on the wind, faces in the fire, the smell of roasting meat when there is no meat. Eventually, the band reaches a threshold. No one names aloud. The very old and the very young begin to die quietly in the back of the shelter, their bodies cool beside the living. For days, no one touches them. The taboo is ancient, older than language. The dead are still people. They belong to the spirits, to the earth, to memory. To disturb them is to invite disaster. Hunger does not respect memory. There comes a night no one afterwards can say exactly which night, when the last child stops crying because it no longer has the strength. The fire is down to a single glowing coal the size of a child's palm outside. The temperature is -45. The living count the dead and realize there are now more bodies that do not breathe than bodies that do. Someone, perhaps a mother, whose milk dried weeks ago, perhaps an elder who has watched 3 grandchildren fade, breaks the silence. A sentence so soft it is barely more than shaping breath with the lips. They are already gone. The cold has taken them. Nothing worse can happen to them now. That sentence is the hinge on which everything turns. In the morning, the coal is coaxed back to fragile life, a flint knife. The same knife used on reindeer and horse is lifted with shaking hands. The first cut is the hardest. The sound it makes is unmistakable, wet and intimate. Someone begins to weep, but no one tells the knife to stop. What follows is not frenzy. It is careful, almost reverent. The body is treated exactly like any large game animal, skinned, jointed, the long bones cracked for the rich yellow marrow that can keep a starving adult alive another week. The organs are eaten first, liver, heart, brain, because they spoil fastest and because they are richest. Nothing is wasted, even the smallest. Bones are boiled again and again until they yield the last trace of fat, and something strange happens. The band does not die. The children, who still have the strength to swallow, are fed broth made from human bone. The adults feel energy return, thin, trembling, but real. The fire burns a little brighter because fat trimmings are added to the last scraps of dwarf willow outside. The blizzard continues its endless scream, but inside the cave there is, for the first time in months, the smell of cooking. The taboo is broken, and the world does not end. Instead, the survivors learn a new and terrible arithmetic. 1 adult body can feed a family of 5 for almost 2 weeks if every fragment is used. A child's body buys 3 or 4 days. With careful management, a single death can keep the rest of the band alive long enough for the reindeer to return, or for the weather to break, or for some miracle no one dares to name. This is not madness. This is the coldest form of love in the centuries that follow. The practice spreads quietly, the way any successful survival strategy spreads. Not everywhere. Some bands still choose to die intact, but in enough places that the bones begin to carry unmistakable signatures, cut marks in the same pattern used on reindeer thighs. Skulls cracked open exactly like aurochs' skulls. Long bones split with the precision of experienced butchers. The evidence survives in the frozen ground of Europe. Gough's cave in England, K-Nen in Czechia, Dolní Věstonice in Moravia, Herxheim in Germany, places we will visit together later. Tonight, the marks on those bones are not random. They are the handwriting of starvation, and they are written by the direct ancestors of every person listening. To this now, we carry their story in our very marrow. We carry their silence, their guilt, their refusal to vanish. Tonight, we will follow that story into the caves where the fires burned low and the wind never stopped howling. We will touch the bones that still carry the marks of flint knives wielded by hands that shook with grief as much as cold. We will ask the question no one wants to ask, and we will answer it with the only honesty the evidence allows, because the darkest secret of the Ice Age is not that humans became monsters. It is that monsters would have died, and we did. Close your eyes now. The fire is almost out, and the hunger has just begun. The evidence begins in the darkness of caves 15,000 years ago. Shortly after the absolute peak of cold, a small band of hunters took shelter in what we now call Gough's Cave, high in the Mendip Hills of southwest England. Outside, the world was still locked in the frozen aftermath of the last glacial maximum. Inside, the cave was a warren of narrow passages lit only by the flicker of fat-burning lamps. In 1903, miners quarrying for limestone broke into a side chamber and found what the hunters had left behind. Scattered across the floor were the bones of at least 7 humans, 3 children between 3 and 9 years old, 2 adolescents, and 2 adults. Every skull had been carefully shaped into a drinking cup. The base of each cranium had been knocked out with precise blows, the jagged edges smoothed by grinding against stone. The long bones, femurs, tibias, humeri were snapped open exactly the way modern butchers split marrow bones. The ends showed the characteristic spiral fractures made when fresh, living bone is twisted apart. Every rib had been sliced from the spine with a flint knife drawn in a single, confident motion. There were no animal bones mixed. This was not a refuse heap from a hunt. This was a human meal. The cut marks are the most chilling part. Under a scanning electron microscope, they are identical to the marks left on red deer and horse bones from the same period. The same hand that skinned a reindeer the week before had skinned a child the week after. The same practiced twist that cracked open an aurochs femur had cracked open a human one. This was not rage. This was routine. The archaeologists who studied Gough's Cave in the 1980s and again with modern techniques in 2010-2015 reached the same quiet, terrible conclusion: nutritional cannibalism. The bodies had been defleshed while still fresh. Skin were peeled away in one piece. The marks are unmistakable. tongues were removed with delicate cuts at the base. Cheeks were sliced off like steaks. Brains were extracted through the newly opened skull base. Every usable calorie was harvested with the calm efficiency of people who had done this before and knew they would do it again. And they did. 1,000 kilometers east, in what is now the Czech Republic, the site of Kulna Cave tells the same story from roughly the same moment in deep time. A single adult male, robust, perhaps 40 years old, lies in pieces. His skull is fractured in 5 places, each blow placed to open the brain case without shattering it completely. His ribs show parallel cut marks spaced exactly like the scoring on mammoth ribs when fat is stripped away. His fingers and toes are missing. Small bones burn well when wood is gone. Further south, in Moravia, the open-air settlement of Dolní Věstonice yields something even more intimate. 3 adolescents, 2 girls, and a boy, all around 15 years old, were processed together. Their bodies were laid side by side, arms touching, as if someone could not bear to separate them, even in death. Then the knives began their work. The cuts are so careful that archaeologists at first thought they were looking at a triple burial with ritual defleshing. Only when they found the spiral fractured long bones and the scorch marks on the skull cups, the truth settled in. These were not enemies, these were family. At Herxheim in southwest Germany, the scale becomes almost industrial. Between T10 and Liu10 Wubei, years ago, still within the long tail of Ice Age conditions, a ring-shaped enclosure was filled with the remains of at least 500 individuals. The bones arrived. Already defleshed skulls were arranged in nests of 7, all facing inward. Every cranium had been turned into a cup. Every long bone had been cracked for marrow. The cut marks are so uniform that researchers speak of standardized processing. Some bodies had been dead only hours when the knives began. Others had been stored frozen for weeks or months and brought out when hunger returned. This was not occasional desperation. This was a survival strategy. We must say the word slowly. Cannibalism, not the cannibalism of myth-wild savages dancing around a fire, not the cannibalism of horror films. This was quiet, methodical, weeping cannibalism. Mothers feeding daughters the only meat left in the world. Brothers cracking their sisters' ribs to reach the marrow that might keep the last child alive another day. Cut made with the same hand that once stroked that same child's hair. The people who did this were not monsters. They were us, only colder, hungrier, and stripped of every illusion. They left clues in the bones that modern science can now read like a diary. Carbon and nitrogen isotope studies from Gough's cave show that, for a period of years, human flesh was a major part of the diet of the survivors. The protein signatures match strontium isotopes in the teeth, prove that at least 2 of the children eaten at Gough's were born and raised within the same small band. No captured outsiders. They ate their own. And the most heartbreaking detail of all, the youngest child at Gough's, barely 3 years old, shows tooth marks on the bones. Human tooth marks. Someone tried to eat the bones themselves when even the marrow was gone. Yet these same people were capable of astonishing tenderness. At Dolní Věstonice, beside the 3 processed adolescents, archaeologists found a small clay figurine, just 4 inches tall, of a woman with full breasts and wide hips. It had been deliberately broken and placed in the fire, perhaps as an offering for the dead children, whose bodies were about to feed the living. They mourned even as they consumed. This is what the breaking of the taboo looked like. Grief and efficiency braided together, so tightly that one cannot be separated from the other. It happened again and again across the frozen north, in Belgium, in France, in Croatia, in Poland, everywhere the glaciers pressed hardest. The pattern is unmistakable. When winter refused to end and the animals disappeared, the last resource was the one resource that could never be replaced, and the world did not punish them for it. The bands that crossed the line survived. The bands that clung to the old laws froze intact, their mouths open in silent screams under the permafrost. Natural selection is not sentimental. Tonight, we will walk deeper into those caves. We will touch the skull cups still stained with ancient finger marks. We will read the cut marks like Braille and feel the shaking hands that made them. We will ask how long a mother can watch her child waste away before love becomes the willingness to do the unthinkable, because every one of us listening tonight carries their blood. The same teeth that left those tiny marks on a 3-year-old's bones are the ancestors of our own teeth. The same hands that shaped a skull into a drinking cup are the grandparents of every hand now resting on a warm blanket. Taboo was broken so thoroughly that it became, for a few desperate millennia, normal. And then, slowly, the world began to warm. But the memory never left us. It is why every culture on Earth, no exceptions, carries a prohibition against eating the dead. It is why the thought still turns the stomach thousands of generations later. We remember, even when we no longer know what we are remembering. Close your eyes. The fire is little more than glowing embers now outside. The wind is rising again, and somewhere in the darkness, a knife is being sharpened against stone. Hunger is not just an empty stomach. It is a slow, patient thief that steals everything else first. After 3 or 4 days without food, the body has burned its sugar, then its fat. By the 10th day, the mind begins to change. Thoughts become circular. Time stretches. The starving person can sit for hours watching a single ember, convinced it is the most important thing in the world. By the 3rd week, the body is eating its own muscle. The heart shrinks, hair falls out in clumps, skin hangs in pale folds, yet the mind, strangely, often becomes calm and eerie, floating clarity. Victims of historic famines describe it the same way. Everything unnecessary falls away. There is only the next mouthful, and the knowledge that there will not be one. This is the moment the taboo begins to lose its power. We know this from the few times in recorded history when modern people have been pushed across the same line. The Donner Party trapped in the Sierra Nevada in 1846-47, the Leningrad siege of 1941-44, the Andes plane crash of 1974. Every single time, the same pattern repeats with almost ritual precision. First stage, absolute refusal. We will die before we touch the dead. Second stage, quiet discussions in the dark. God will understand. They are already gone. Third stage, the first cut. Made by the person least expected, often a mother, often for her children. Fourth stage, silence. No one speaks of it again. The ones who survive never speak of it at all. Ice Age humans had no scripture, no priests, no law written on stone to forbid them. They only had the oldest rule of all: the dead are sacred. That rule was older than fire, older than language. It lived in the bones and the dreams, and yet hunger is older still. Imagine the night it finally happened in a cave we will never find. 10 people are left out of 25 who entered the winter. The last reindeer was killed 2 moons ago. The last dried berries were scraped from a leather pouch weeks before that. The children no longer cry. They simply stare with huge, dry eyes. An old woman died at dusk. She was someone's grandmother, someone's aunt. The keeper of songs no one else remembers. Her body lies in the back of the shelter, already cooling. The temperature outside is -40. Inside, the fire is 3 handfuls of bones and a twist of dried grass. Someone, maybe the best hunter, maybe the youngest mother, crawls over to the body in the dark. No one stops them. No one even looks. The first cut is made by feel alone. The knife is the same one used to skin wolves. The sound is soft, wet, familiar. A smell rises that is not wolf, not reindeer, not horse, but unmistakably human. The next morning, the pot is boiling. No one asks what is in it. The children are fed first. They drink without tasting, without understanding. Their bellies stop hurting for the first time in weeks, and nothing happens. The sky does not fall. The ancestors do not rise in anger. The dead woman's spirit does not return to curse them. The world simply goes on being cold, and the living go on being alive. That is the most terrifying discovery of all. The taboo is not enforced by gods. It is enforced only by the living, and the living can choose to look away. After the first time, the second time is easier. The third time is routine. The mind rewires itself with brutal efficiency. The dead cease to be people and become meat. A leg is a leg, a skull is a bowl waiting to happen. The part of the brain that once screamed, "This is wrong," learns to be quiet because silence means another dawn. We know this happens because modern neuroscience has watched it happen in real time, in starvation experiments, ethical ones. From the 1940s and 50s, volunteers who reached 30% body weight loss began showing the same. Emotional flattening. Empathy drops. Moral disgust fades. One subject wrote in his diary, "I saw a dead cat in the street and thought only of stew before I felt the horror I knew I should feel." In the Leningrad siege, diaries record the exact day each writer stopped being shocked by cannibalism. For some, it was day 20. For others, day 40. After that, the entries become practical. Masha from the 3rd floor was processed today. Good fat on her. The children will have strength for another week. The Andes survivors waited 70 days. They made a pact: if I die, use me. When the first boy died, they honored the pact. One of them later said the hardest part was not the eating. It was the moment they realized they were no longer horrified. Ice Age people had centuries, not days or weeks. They had winters that lasted years. They had children born into a world where human flesh was simply another food source when the reindeer failed. Those children grew up, had their own children, and taught them the new rules without ever speaking the old ones. The taboo did not just break, it was unlearned, and the proof is in the bones. At every site we have discussed Gough's cave, Herxheim, Dolní Věstonice, the processing marks become more efficient over time. Early cuts are hesitant, overlapping, wasteful. Later cuts are clean. Single strokes. The people got better at it. Practice made perfect. Some bands may have developed unspoken protocols. Only eat those who died. Naturally, never kill for food. That line was still too far. Closing parenthesis. Always share equally. Never speak the names again. Once the body is opened, we do not know the details because they left no writing, but the bones speak clearly. Enough there is evidence. Some groups crossed even that final line. At the French site of Le Placard, a child's skeleton shows perimortem fractures broken while the bone was still fresh, that are difficult to explain by accidental death. At Herxheim, a few individuals have cranial injuries consistent with deliberate killing. Not many, most were clearly starvation deaths, but enough to whisper that when winter refused to end, some hands may have helped the old and the weak along the path, so the young could eat. We will never know for certain. The evidence is too fragile, too open to interpretation, but the possibility hangs in the air like frost. What we do know is this: the bands that adapted survived. The bands that could not bring themselves to cross the line left no descendants. Every person alive today descends from the ones who could. That is the coldest truth of all. Tonight, when you feel the ancient revulsion rise in your throat at the thought of what they did, remember that revulsion itself is their legacy. The taboo rebuilt itself the moment there was again enough food to make it safe. Horror we feel is the scar tissue over a wound that once saved the species. Close your eyes now. The cave is quiet, except for the soft bubbling of the pot. No one is crying anymore. The children are asleep, with full bellies for the first time in months. Outside, the wind still howls, but inside there is warmth, and tomorrow there will be another sunrise. The fire burns a little brighter tonight, and the hunger, for now, sleeps. Come closer to the fire. The flames are low, but they are steady tonight. We are going to sit with 3 specific families who lived and died 30,000 years ago. Their names are lost, but their bones remember everything. First family, Dolní Věstonice, Moravia, 27,000 years ago. 3 adolescents lie side by side in a shallow grave. That was never meant to stay a grave. 2 girls and 1 boy, all around 15 years old. They died within days of one another's starvation. Most likely, their ribs are like pale bird wings, their faces sharp with the last stages of hunger. Someone, their mother, their older brother, we cannot know, arranged them carefully. Left hand of the boy resting on the chest of the girl. Beside him, the second girl's arm draped across both, as if even in death they were holding each other. Then, the knives came out. The cuts begin at the base of the skull and run down the spine in 3 perfect lines. Shoulders are disjointed. with the same practiced twist used on reindeer thigh. Muscles are sliced away in long, clean strips. Every major muscle group is removed and set aside. The belly cavities are opened and emptied with the reverence of people who know these organs will spoil fastest. The long bones are carried to the hearth and cracked open while the marrow is still warm. The sound is soft, intimate, like splitting green wood. Skulls are detached, the faces peeled away in one piece, the brain scooped out with fingers or a wooden spoon. Yet even in the processing there is tenderness. Between the three bodies lies a broken clay figurine, the famous Venus of Dolní Věstonice. Her hips are wide, her breasts heavy, with milk that never came. She was fired in the same hearth that cooked the children. Someone placed her shattered body on the flames as the pot began to boil, an offering, an apology, a promise that this would never be spoken of again. Second family, Gough's Cave, England. 15,000 years ago, a 3-year-old child, too small to have a name we will ever recover. The bones are tiny, bird delicate. The skull has been turned into a cup so small it would barely hold a modern teacup. The edges are polished smooth by hands that trembled as they worked. The cuts on the little arms and legs are hesitant at first. Then sure, someone started the job and could not finish it alone. A second person took the knife. The marrow was scraped out with a flint flake and fed immediately to a living sibling. We know this because the scrape marks are still wet in the microscopic record-closing parenthesis. Adult tooth marks ring the ends of the tiny, long bones. Someone tried to eat the bones themselves when even the marrow was gone. The marks are not savage. They are desperate, almost loving, as if the mouth itself was trying to keep the child inside a little longer. Third family, Herxheim, Germany. 7,000 years ago, still cold enough that winter kills. This one is not a single family, but many 500 souls processed over decades. They arrived at the enclosure already dead or dying, carried in from surrounding camps when starvation became unbearable. The enclosure is a ring of ditches and palisades, a place of ceremony once, perhaps. Now it is a quiet factory of survival. The skulls are arranged in groups of 7, all facing inward like flowers. Every skull is a cup, every long bone is split. The cuts are so uniform that archaeologists speak of butchery stations. One person removed scalps, another opened skulls, another split limbs, an assembly line of grief. Among the hundreds, one deposit stands out. 7 individuals, 2 adults, 5 children laid in a perfect circle, heads toward the center. Their bodies were processed with special care. The adults' hands had been placed over the children's eyes before the knives began. Even in the final act, someone was still trying to shield them from what was coming. We cannot call these people monsters. Monsters do not arrange their dead with tenderness. Monsters do not fire clay mothers and break them on the same hearth that cooks their children. Monsters do not cover the eyes of the little ones before the cutting begins. These were mothers who sang lullabies with voices raw from hunger. These were fathers who once carried those same children on their shoulders to watch the reindeer migrate. Were brothers and sisters who shared the last piece of frozen fat and smiled so the others would. not see them cry. They did what they did because love, in the end, is stronger than horror. Love says, I will become the unthinkable so that you can live. And they lived. The child who drank the marrow broth from her sister's bones grew up. She had children of her own. When the world finally warmed, those children never knew hunger like that again. They learned to plant seeds, to herd animals, to store grain against bad winters. They told stories around warm fires about a time when the sun went away and the people refused to follow it. But they never told the whole story. The details were left in the caves, in the ditches, in the polished skull cups that were buried face down so no one would ever have to drink from them again. Every culture on earth carries the echo, do not eat the dead. The prohibition is universal, fierce and absolute. That very universality is the proof. Something happened so widespread, so terrible, that every surviving lineage swore the same oath. Never again. Yet, here we are. Every one of us descends from those frozen families. The same hands that once held a tiny skull cup are the hands that built villages, temples, cities, spaceships. The same mouths that once tasted the unthinkable are the mouths that learned to speak of love, of mercy, of tomorrow. The fire is warm tonight. The wind outside is only wind, not the voice of winter trying to get in somewhere far away. A child is asleep with a full belly and no memory of what her ancestors did so she could exist. That is the debt we can never repay and can never forget. To the quiet breathing of the person beside you, or the soft hum of your own blood. That sound is 30,000 years old. It was paid for, in full, in darkness, by people who loved you before they ever knew you would be born. The fire is steady now, and for the first time in millennia, no one is hungry. The fire settles into embers outside. The wind has finally dropped. Inside, the cave is warm with the smell of cooking, and the survivors are alive. But survival is never free. There is a price written in bone, in blood, and in the long silence that followed. First, the price in the body. When human marrow and human brain become regular food, strange things begin to happen. Inside the skull, we know this from a disease that appeared much later among the four people of Papua New Guinea in the 20th century. They practiced funerary cannibalism, women and children eating the brains of deceased relatives as an act of love and grief. Within decades, a fatal tremor appeared, then laughter, then collapse. They called it kuru to shake. We call it a prion disease. Mismolded proteins that turn the brain into sponge. The incubation period is 10 to 50 years. A person can eat infected brain once, live normally for decades, then suddenly lose the ability to walk, speak, swallow. Death follows within months. In the four, the epidemic exploded because the same people ate the same brains generation after generation. In Ice Age Europe, the pattern was different, sporadic, desperate, spread across centuries. But the raw material was the same: human central nervous system tissue. We have looked for kuru in the archaeological record. In 2017, a team from the Max Planck Institute re-examined Neanderthal and early modern human skulls from sites with heavy cannibalism signatures. They found microscopic pitting and spongy lesions on the outer surface of several crania patterns that match early-stage prion damage in known Kuru victims. The sample is tiny, the evidence is contested, but the possibility hangs in the air like smoke. Even without full-blown Kuru, repeated consumption of human neural tissue leaves traces. Abnormally high levels of certain prions have been detected. In the dental calculus of individuals from Gough's cave and Herxheim, the proteins are still there, 30,000 years later, clinging to the teeth that once scraped marrow from human bones. The body paid. Some of those who survived the winter may have walked into a second, slower death decades later, trembling, laughing, wasting away while their grandchildren watched in horror. Second, the price in the bloodline. Starvation plus cannibalism is a genetic bottleneck inside a bottleneck. The entire European population during the last glacial maximum may have dropped below 1,000 breeding pairs. Add selective survival of only the bands willing to eat their own dead, and you create a filter so fine it leaves permanent marks in our DNA. In 2021, a study compared modern European genomes with ancient DNA from the glacial period. They found a cluster of rare alleles genetic variants that are almost absent before 20,000 years ago, but suddenly become common after 15,000 years ago. Some of these alleles affect fat metabolism, cold tolerance, and most intriguingly, the immune response to prions. One variant in particular, known as V127, offers partial protection against prion diseases like Kuru and its cousin, Creutzfeldt-Jakobi disease. It is found today in 100% of modern Europeans and is virtually absent in sub-Saharan African populations who never went through the same ice age crucible. We selected for it the people who could eat their dead without dying of it 30 years later. Were slightly more likely to have grandchildren. Over a few thousand years, slightly becomes every single one of us. Third, the price in the mind. There is no archaeology for nightmares, but we carry them anyway. Every culture on Earth, without exception, treats cannibalism as the ultimate pollution. The prohibition is stronger than murder, stronger than incest in many societies. Anthropologists used to think this was purely cultural. Now, we understand it may be older than culture. Children raised in societies that have never known famine still show instinctive revulsion at the idea of eating human flesh. Brain imaging studies revealed that the disgust response lights up the same ancient circuits used for rotting meat and disease. The reaction is faster and stronger than for any other moral violation that is ancestral memory. The grandchildren of the survivors grew up in a warming world where reindeer returned and plants began to fruit again. They buried the skull cups face down. They never spoke the names of the eaten, but they taught their own children with shaking voices and pale faces, never, 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 and the children obeyed, because the sight of an adult trembling at a story is more powerful than any law. Fourth, the price in the soul of the species. For a few thousand years, humanity learned that the boundary between person and food is negotiable. That is a dangerous lesson. When the world warmed and the great herds came back, most bands returned to the old ways. The skull cups were smashed. The long bones were gathered and buried. Far from camp, the silence became absolute. But some groups remembered the lesson too well. In the millennia that followed, we see scattered echoes. The Azoria massacre in 6th century BCE Crete, where victims were butchered and cooked in cauldrons. The Anasazi drought cannibalism events in the American Southwest around 1150 CE. The deliberate terra cannibalism of some Neolithic circular enclosures in Central Europe. Each time, the pattern is the same: extreme stress, collapse of normal food supply, and then a few people who remember that the line can be crossed again. We are their descendants, and we carry both gifts. The same adaptability that let a mother feed her child with her sister's marrow is the adaptability that let us sail oceans, split atoms, walk on the moon. The same refusal to die is the refusal that built hospitals, vaccines, food banks. But the shadow is always there. Every time a modern famine occurs, Ukraine 1930–33, North Korea 1990s, Yemen today. The same reports surface quietly: missing bodies, strange stews, children who stopped asking questions. The silence is the same. Silence that settled over Gough's cave 30,000 years ago. We paid in disease. We paid in genetic scars. We paid in nightmares we cannot name. And we paid in the knowledge buried so deep we only feel it as disgust that under the right kind of hunger, any one of us could do it again. But we also paid forward. Every warm meal you have ever eaten, every full pantry, every humanitarian airlift, every stranger who shared their last crust of bread is interest on that ancient debt. The people in the caves did not know. Their sacrifice would buy 30,000 years of summers. They only knew the child in front of them might live one more day. They paid the price so completely that we have never had to pay it again tonight. When you feel that instinctive twist in your stomach at what they did, do not turn away from it. That twist is their voice, carried across ice and time, saying, "We did this so you would never have to. Remember us when your table is full. Remember us when you teach your children to share. Remember us when you turn on the light against the dark." The fire is almost out now, but tomorrow the sun will rise a little higher, and the reindeer are already moving north again. The price has been paid. The long winter is ending. Close your eyes. You are warm, you are safe, and you are impossibly, unimaginably loved by people who never knew your name. The fire is down to a single bed of red coals outside. Something has changed. Listen, the wind no longer has teeth. It moves across the mouth of the cave like a hand brushing hair from a child's face. Somewhere far away, a raven calls once, then again. The long winter is loosening its grip. It happens slowly, the way all true miracles do. First, the days stretch by minutes, then by hours. The sun climbs a little higher each noon until shadows fall shorter than a man's foot. Snow begins to retreat from south-facing slopes, revealing black earth that steams in the weak light. Water drips from the cave roof in a steady, impossible rhythm, drip, drip, like the world remembering how to cry for joy. By 14,500 years ago, the great ice is in full retreat. Rivers that have been frozen highways for millennia roar to life, carving new valleys. Birch and pine race northward faster than any human can walk. Reindeer herds return in numbers no living person has ever seen. Behind them come red deer, horse, aurochs, ibex, an explosion of meat on hooves. The survivors step out of their caves, blinking like newborns. They are few, perhaps only 1,000 breeding pairs across the whole of Europe. Their children are thin, their hair dull, their eyes too old for their faces. but they are alive. And the world has suddenly become generous again. They do not speak of what happened in the darkness. Some things are too heavy for words. Instead, they act. The skull cups are gathered in silence and carried far from camp. They are buried face down beneath cairns of stone, so heavy no child will ever dig them up. The long bones that once fed them are wrapped in birch bark and laid in crevices high on cliff faces, returned to the sky. The caves themselves are abandoned to many ghosts in the smokestains on the roof. New camps are built in the open, on river terraces where the sun stays all day. The first thing they plant is not grain will come millennia later, but memory. They teach their children 3 lessons that will be spoken in every language humanity will ever invent. Share food, waste nothing, never again. And the children obey, because they have seen what happens when the world forgets. By 12,000 years ago, the mammoth steppe is turning green. Forests swallow the old hunting grounds. The great ice has shrunk to distant white caps on mountains no one will climb for another 10,000 years. The people follow the warming. Some walk west to the Atlantic that is no longer frozen. Some walk east until the grass becomes endless. Some stay and learn the secrets of salmon and hazel groves wherever they go. They carry fire in their bellies, the same fire that once burned human fat, now burns pine and hope. They begin to paint again, not the desperate hand stencils of the deep caves, but soaring images of animals in full sunlight. They carve bone flutes and play melodies the glaciers never heard. They bury their dead whole now, wrapped in red ochre and flowers, because the earth is giving back more than it takes. Yet something has changed in them forever. They store food the way dragons hoard gold. They invent granaries, smokehouses, drying racks. They weave nets so fine that a single salmon run can feed a village for months. They learn to ferment, to salt, to preserve anything rather than feel that particular emptiness again. They become the first people who plan for a winter that might never come. And when the first wild wheat ripens along the rivers of the Near East, it is these same descendants, children of the skull-cup bearers, who notice, who stop, who kneel and taste. They are the ones who decide to stay, to plant, to wait for the miracle of green shoots returning exactly where they were put. Agriculture is born not from leisure, but from memory. Every loaf of bread you have ever eaten, every grain of rice, every drop of milk is interest on a debt paid in a cave 30,000 years ago by people who loved tomorrow more than they feared the knife tonight. Somewhere in the world, a child is falling asleep with a full belly and no idea why the sight of an empty plate makes adults suddenly quiet. That silence is 30,000 years old. It is the sound of grandmothers who once cracked open their sisters' ribs, so a stranger 30 millennia in the future could taste bread and honey. It is the sound of grandfathers who carried the last burning coal through endless night, so that one day a child could blow out birthday candles without knowing what real darkness feels like. The long winter is over. The people who emerged from it were not the same species that went in, were harder and softer at the same time. They had looked into the abyss and seen not monsters but themselves, and chosen to keep walking anyway. They carried 2 gifts out of the ice. The first was the knowledge that love can be heavier than horror. that a mother's hand can do the unthinkable and still be a mother's hand. The second was the absolute, unbreakable refusal to die. Every hospital, every food bank, every stranger who ever pressed half a sandwich into a hungry hand is the echo of that refusal. Every time humans choose to share instead of hoard, to plant instead of burn, to forgive instead of avenge, we are keeping a promise made in the dark when there was nothing left to eat but each other. The fire is out now. Only a faint warmth rises from the ashes, but it is enough. Outside, the first pale light of dawn is touching the edge of the world. Somewhere a child is waking to birdsong and the smell of warm bread. That child is you. That bread is made from wheat first planted by hands that once trembled, holding a flint knife over a sibling's body. That birdsong is sung by descendants of ravens who once picked frozen eyes from the snow. Everything beautiful in your world was purchased at a price you will never have to pay again. All you have to do is remember. When the table is full, remember. When you teach a child to share. Remember. When you turn on a light against the dark, remember the people who loved you before they ever knew you would exist. They kept the fire alive. Now it is your turn. Close your eyes. You are warm. You are safe. You are the dawn they never lived to see. And somewhere, very softly, 30,000 years away, a circle of survivors is smiling in their sleep. The winter is over. The people refused to follow the sun when it went away instead. They carried it inside themselves until morning came. Good night.